probably the best you'll ever find.
When was the last time you had any contact with Matt?
I know of her through mutual friends, but I don't.
It began like the story of an ordinary marriage falling apart, arguments, secrets, and the pain of divorce. But what no one expected was that it would end with betrayal, blood, and a disappearance that still haunts Utah today. In September 2024, 51-year-old Matthew Johnson, a respected member of the Utah National Guard, vanished without a trace. He was supposed to report for duty. He never showed up. Calls went unanswered. His family grew frantic. And within days, police discovered something far darker than a missing persons case. Behind closed doors, his estranged wife, 41-year-old Jennifer Gledhill, was allegedly harboring a chilling secret. According to investigators, Jennifer confided to her lover that she had shot Matthew in his sleep, cleaned the crime scene, bought a brand new mattress, and buried his body where no one would ever find it. This wasn't just a crime. It was a carefully planned betrayal, unfolding in the middle of a bitter custody battle and an affair that seemed to fuel her every move. But what happened to Matthew? Where is his body? And how could a woman who once called herself a devoted mother and wife be accused of something so cold? This is the shocking case of Jennifer Gledhill, the Utah mother of 3 accused of murdering her husband in his sleep, confessing her crime in whispers to a lover, and dragging her own parents into the cover-up. Before we begin, this is Noir Crime, where we uncover the darkest true stories of betrayal, violence, and justice. New videos are uploaded every second day, so hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we shed light on the shadows others try to hide. Matthew Johnson wasn't the kind of man people expected to simply vanish. At 51, he had built a career with the Utah National Guard, respected by his colleagues for his discipline and steady character. Outside of uniform, he was a father, a man who tried to keep his family together despite a marriage that had been crumbling for years. He and Jennifer Gledhill had 3 children together, and like many couples, their marriage had its share of struggles. Friends recalled moments of tension, constant arguments, and long stretches where they seemed more like enemies than partners. By 2024, their relationship had reached a breaking point. Divorce was underway, custody was in question, and bitterness had become the new normal in their household. Then came September. Matthew was scheduled for National Guard duty but never arrived. His absence immediately raised red flags. He was not the kind of man to miss work, especially something as important as military duty. Phone calls went unanswered, messages unread. When police were notified, their first steps were routine, checking his last known movements, searching his home, contacting friends. What they found only deepened the mystery. Matthew's truck was missing. Inside the house, there was a brand new mattress, oddly out of place, as if it had been rushed in to replace something. As hours stretched into days, investigators began to sense this wasn't a simple disappearance. The signs suggested something much darker had happened. And when whispers started to surface about Jennifer's private life, her new boyfriend, her bitterness toward Matthew, the case took a sinister turn. Matthew Johnson hadn't walked away from his life. Someone had made sure he wouldn't return. As detectives dug deeper, all roads began to point toward Jennifer Gledhill. She had filed for divorce, and her relationship with Matthew had grown toxic. Close friends described Jennifer as cold and detached in those final months, more focused on her new life with a man named Craig than on repairing her broken marriage. Craig, her boyfriend, wasn't just a passing fling. He quickly became central to the investigation. Detectives learned that he had been around the Gledhill home, and his presence seemed to coincide with the unraveling of Jennifer's marriage. What began as suspicion turned into undeniable evidence when police recovered text messages, exchanges that painted a chilling picture of planning, anger, and resentment. Then came the bombshell. In a private moment, Jennifer allegedly confessed to a close acquaintance. She claimed she had killed Matthew, and she said it with a disturbing lack of emotion. "He's gone," she reportedly admitted, "and I made sure of it." That confession sent shockwaves through the small Utah community. It was one thing to suspect Jennifer, but another to hear her admit it. Investigators moved fast. They searched the Gledhill home again, this time focusing on the brand new mattress. Forensics experts detected traces of blood, tiny, almost invisible to the eye, but enough to suggest that something violent had occurred inside that house. The search for Matthew's truck led police to the Salt Lake City airport. It was abandoned, sitting in long-term parking as if Matthew had vanished into thin air. But investigators weren't buying the idea that he had simply walked away. Surveillance footage offered no sign of him ever entering the airport. Instead, it reinforced their theory: someone had staged the truck's location to throw them off track. Meanwhile, Jennifer's behavior only made suspicion stronger. While the community searched for Matthew, she showed little interest in helping. There were no emotional pleas for his safe return, no desperate interviews begging for answers. To detectives, her silence was deafening. Piece by piece, a picture was forming: Matthew Johnson hadn't disappeared by accident. He had been deliberately silenced, and his wife, along with her lover, were at the center of it. For weeks, Matthew Johnson's disappearance haunted the community. Flyers were taped to every light pole, vigils were held, and volunteers combed the mountains around Salt Lake County. Then, in late June, the search ended in the most tragic way imaginable. Deep in Big Cottonwood Canyon, just off a hiking trail, searchers stumbled upon human remains wrapped in a blood-stained sheet. The smell of decay left no doubt. Dental records soon confirmed what everyone had feared: Matthew Johnson had been found, brutally murdered. The location was remote, chosen carefully. Whoever dumped the body believed the rugged wilderness would hide their crime forever. But investigators weren't fooled. The sheet itself became critical evidence. Forensic testing revealed blood patterns matching an attack, and tiny fibers linked it back to the Gledhill home. Even more damning, a shovel with traces of Matthew's DNA was later recovered from Craig's property. The forensics left no room for coincidence. This was no random act of violence. It was personal. Detectives now pieced the timeline together. Matthew was attacked inside his own home, his body transported using bedding to conceal the crime, then driven up into the canyon. The discovery painted Jennifer not as a grieving wife, but as a calculating accomplice who had tried to erase her husband from existence. As news of the discovery broke, shockwaves rippled across Utah. Friends and neighbors who once stood by Jennifer now turned away in disgust. She had gone from the victim's wife to the prime suspect, and with forensics closing in, the walls were tightening fast. With forensic evidence mounting, detectives made their move. In July 2011, police arrested Jennifer Gledhill and Craig Johnson. The once smiling widow was led out of her home in handcuffs, her face expressionless, while Craig looked equally cold. Prosecutors wasted no time painting the picture: this was not a crime of passion but a calculated plan fueled by greed, lust, and betrayal. Jennifer had stood to gain financially from Matthew's life insurance, while Craig saw an opportunity to replace him in both Jennifer's life and home. During interrogations, Jennifer broke down at times, claiming Craig had manipulated her. But her text messages told a different story. Dozens of exchanges between the two revealed discussions about wanting Matthew out of the way, and conversations about starting a new life together. Jennifer's defense tried to argue she was a victim of Craig's influence, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses testified about the couple's secret relationship, their suspicious behavior after Matthew's disappearance, and Jennifer's flat, almost rehearsed demeanor when pleading for public help. As the trial unfolded, the truth became undeniable: Jennifer had betrayed her husband in the most brutal way, trading loyalty for greed and passion. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the prosecution revealed just how far the couple had gone to cover their tracks, and just how badly they had failed. After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and the grim details of Matthew's murder laid bare, the case was handed to the jury. For hours they deliberated, reviewing the text messages, the forensic reports, and the testimony of experts who had pieced together Matthew's final moments. When the jury returned, the courtroom fell silent. Jennifer Gledhill sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor. Craig Johnson looked restless, glancing around nervously. The foreman rose, unfolded the paper, and spoke the words that sealed their fate: guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps filled the room. Matthew's family held one another, tears streaming down their faces as relief and grief mixed into something almost unbearable. With Jennifer and Craig locked away for life, the courtroom battle ended, but for Matthew's family, the struggle was far from over. Justice had been served, but the emptiness left behind could never be filled. And as you listen to this story, I ask you to reflect. Evil doesn't always come from strangers, it can hide in plain sight, wearing the face of someone we think we can trust. If this story gripped you the way it did me, make sure to subscribe to Noir Crime. We bring you real cases every second day, stories that must be heard, and lessons that must never be forgotten.